Hello, CS112. Today I'll be going over a quick solution to Lab 10, which has to do with exception handling. The gist of this assignment is that you were given a string date that was in a format that looks something like this, and you were to reformat it to return a string that had the format like this. So essentially, changing it to a year, month, day format. And along with that, we needed to verify that the day given to us was okay. Now, on the PDF, it told us what we needed to check for each of the conditionals. So, for instance, we needed to check if the date was in a proper range. So that means the dates can't be 0 or negative, and it can't be 32 or above. The month had to actually make sense in terms of, like, it has to be a real month, and the month would always be denoted by 3 characters, so the first 3 letters of the month. And it would look something like this. They did give us a set with all the month names, so they did encourage us to create a variable that looks like that, so it's a lot easier to check. And then lastly, for the year, we just had to verify that it was 4 digits long. So one of the first clues that was given to you guys was to not only make a set of these guys here, of the months, but to make a dictionary where the keys are the months and then the value are its associated number month. So that in this case, January would be 01, September would be 09, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to dive right into it. So initially, when I first read this problem, I always think it's easier to work with a list rather than just having to slice strings at specific indexes. So, excuse me. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use split. So I'm going to say, let's create a variable called, I'm blanking out right now, date string equals date dot split. If I don't feed anything into split, what it will do is it will just split up by the empty characters here. It is essentially the same thing as doing that. So I'm just going to really quickly, since I'm a pragmatic programmer, see what I've done if I were to print out date string. And I already have all the test cases out here. However, let's just work with the first one as we walk through and initially debug our code. So now if I type in Python and the name of my file, okay, I've done exactly what I wanted to. So I've split up this given string by the spaces, so each element is now going to represent the day, the month, and the year. So now what should we do? Well, now is where the error handling is going to come in. So we did make it a little easier on you guys for this one, that you just needed to throw one generic error. So let's go ahead and create our try and except block. In this case, I'm going to use an example that was directly on the lab slides as exception as E. And I'm just going to print out the error message because that's what the GTA has told us to do here. And what this does is if an exception is thrown up here, it will take E as the error message. So you'll see later on when I type the exception, it will take that error message string and just print it out when this is thrown. So what's the very first thing we should do? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is check for proper day. What is a proper day? Well, like I said before, it just needs to be within the range of 1 to 31. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set day equal to the date string. And my date string looks like this. And I want the very first element, so that's going to be the 0th index, except I only want the first 2 characters of that. So I'm going to go one step further and slice that into 0, 2, because that is the starts, and then to the index -1. And I can just get rid of that first 0 because that will just imply that I want to start. So what this will do is slice the 0 and the first index of the string, that's the 2 and the 0, and it's not inclusive, so it won't include the second index. And something else I would like to do actually is wrap this all in the int function because I want to do math with it. Because it is going to be a lot easier to just say something like if day is less than 0, or if day is greater than 31. We are going to want to raise exception, and then inside here is where I'm going to have my little error message, which is to look like this. So I'm just going to pop that right in here. And like I said before, Once I raise exception, it will shoot down to the exception, and this E will just represent the error message I'm feeding through it in here, and it will be just displayed to your terminal. So next I'm going to want to check for the proper month. And I'm going to create a month variable similarly like I did above and just set that equal to date string 1. It might not even be necessary to do this, but I just want to do it for readability. And I want to check if month is not in month dict. So that month dict I created up here, what the in operator will do against the dictionary is it will check if month is a key in that dictionary. So it's only going to check these keys. It will not check these values. So if I had these reversed, so for instance, if my entire dictionary looks like this, where the key was the number and this was the value was the month characters, this wouldn't work because if Jan would not exist in this dictionary since it only checks the values. So that's why I formatted it in that way specifically. But if it doesn't exist in here, I'm just going to do like I did above and just throw this generic error here. And lastly, we are going to want to check for the proper year. And all we need to do here is check if the length of the date string at the index 012 does not equal 4, we're just going to want to throw an error there because it can only equal 4. We're assuming that nobody was born in the hundreds and nobody was born in the tens of thousands either. So I'm just going to raise that exception there. So now let's say none of these errors were raised. We actually want to format our return string or our return dates in the form. I'm just going to write it down here so I remember. So that's year dash day, or is it day? I think it's day. Nope, it's month dash day. Okay, so I need to reformat in that way, essentially looking like this. And it's going to be the easiest to use an F string in this case. So I'm going to say return, and then date is, it's 0 dash 1 dash 2, and then dot formats. And then in here, what do I want the first one to be? Well, I want that to be our date string year, correct? And our date string year is going to be 0, 1, 2. So that's just going to be date string 2. Our second one, we want to be, this one's actually more of an interesting one because we don't want it to simply be date string 1, right? We want it to be the actual number associated with it. So in this case, how do we grab the value? Well, the syntax we need to use to grab this value is simply by calling the dictionary name followed by the key, because that will return us the value. So just to put that into code, I would say month dict, and then the name of the key, which is going to be the month character, which is our date string 1. And that will give us the actual number associated with it. And then lastly, we want to just grab the date string, but only the first 2 characters, similarly how I did above. And this time I'm just going to copy and paste this so I don't have to type that out. Yes, now the reason I am slicing it by 2 is because we would end up getting like 20th in our return, which it does not have here. So let's just run this real quick with our first one, see if I have any typos. So I'm going to run python cat.py, and as you can see, we get datas and the correct output. So real quick, I'm just going to uncomment the rest of the things. And as you can see, the correct output is given. Let me just make this a little bigger and scroll down here so we can see the output. So first we are getting, I am accidentally still printing this out. Hold on. This was weird. This is an old thing. Give me 1 second here. I shouldn't even be printing that out. Okay, that's a little odd. Let me just clear that and let me run it again. And as you can see, I'm getting the correct output here. The first I'm saying date is 2052, 10, and so on and so forth. And as you can see, I'm also getting the input is invalid for these 3 here. Now I am getting none displayed as well because I am printing out the return value here, and when the exception is raised, there technically is no return value, which is perfectly okay for this because we just wanted you to display it to the terminal, and the GTA set is fine, so just print it out. So there is no return value. If you wanted to actually uh, not have these nuns and return a string, then you would do something slightly different where you would just raise an exception and then return a string inside here without this as e stuff. And there are plenty of examples of this on the lab slides, and I'm sure during your lecture as well, on how you would do that. So if you guys have any questions, do let us know.